Hello there, and welcome to a slightly different episode of Weird Music on the Glumburger channel. I'm going to precede this review by mentioning that this is both a review of an album, by a band I love and have always wanted to review this album, of course, but it's also going to serve as somewhat of a holiday video for my first trip to Iceland I took with my partner. So anyway, this is of course a show where we dive into weird, peculiar albums of all sorts per usual. And so today we're actually going to be looking at, what I would say is a very well-known and popular band whose wonderful discography sees them transcend the language barrier with their unusual blend of post-rock, ambient and dream pop pet sensibilities. We're looking at one of my absolute top favourite albums by this band, the beautifully ethereal Valtari by none other than Sigur Rós. So of course, let's ask ourselves, who are Sigur Rós? Well, Sigur Rós, sort of an art rock, post-rock band from Reykjavik, Iceland. And having been active since 1994, Sigur Rós have released 7 or so albums and a couple of other releases here or there. And generally speaking, their music is a wonderful angelic blend of ambient textures and pop sensibilities. And at least on their most popular and well-known tracks, I would say. And the band, kind of hit the mainstream after the ever-rising popularity of their hit single Hoppy Pola from their 4th album, Tag, which was incidentally my introduction to the band back when I was still at secondary school. Of course, their music is far more interesting than their hit singles, as the band have produced some very unusual albums featuring some wonderful droning elements and ambient textures. Set against this backdrop of, what is arguably conventional pop structures. It's wonderful music, though, that is just truly astounding to listen to sometimes, as John-C's voice is just this beautiful falsetto that climbs and soars high above the instruments in the songs. And some key elements of Sigur Rós's music that I'm sure some people, who know the band definitely know by now, is their extensive use of Bose guitars and e-bows, as well as singing in their own made-up language known as Valenska, which combines Icelandic and non-linguistic vocalizations together. It gives Sigur Rós's music this incredibly dreamy quality that truly transcends the language barrier, as we're confronted with just the sheer emotional impact of it all. And so in today's episode, we're looking at the 2012 album Valtari, an album that arguably strayed away from the more pop rock orientated works of their previous albums, Tag and Mer Silly Vi Spilum Endalaust. Valtari, roughly translating to steamroller in Icelandic, is an 8-track album of beautiful droning post-rock ambience that comes across as this incredibly emotional and cathartic album experience. And there is this absurd pristine beauty to the whole thing, to all the compositions on Valtari, it's kind of peculiar if you think about it, considering that in their previous albums they were kind of hitting the mainstream with these beautiful sort of dreamy post-rock, pop-rock compositions. And I remember, when I first listened to Valtari, I was completely floored by the emotional impact of it all, and it is easily now my top favourite album out of anything they've released. And so we're going to dive into it track by track then. Valtari opens up with the wonderfully atmospheric Jeg Anda, which roughly translates to I breathe. And this is a truly beautiful way to open up the album, as we're given almost minimalist drone effects while John-C vocalizes over the top of it all. And it just lets the music slowly build up and up, establishing the wonderful setting for the album itself. And it feels like, you know, the entire album itself is just slowly coming to life as it just pulls itself together and starts standing up. And it's when you get these really gentle guitar notes accompanied by very sparse bass that we really see the song pushing itself up, really growing and becoming itself. And it turns into this amazing thing until you get this introduction of the vocals that just sets the whole thing into this beautifully structured frenzy of crescendo and big drums. And there is just something so pretty and so beautiful about this opener, which feels wonderfully triumphant when it hits that vocal section, I would say. And then it all just fades back into that beautiful droning opening, of course. And it feels like the sun has broken through over the top of the rather cold, idyllic landscape of Iceland. At least that's what I envision. And then we move on to the second track, Iki Muk, which roughly translates to not a sound. And so when I first heard this record, the year it was released actually, this was the track that really pulled me into the whole experience that the album was presenting. It came across as one of the most beautiful, emotional compositions I'd ever heard from the band. Like, I just remember not being ready for, you know, the sheer emotional impact of this one. You know, the melancholy and the catharsis that came across in the instrumentals and how it all sounds, even John-C's vocals as well. You're just getting this gentle simmering of ambient textures accompanied by such beautiful vocalizations by John-C, and just, oh man, especially in that opening, just how he sounds, there's just something so beautiful and so emotional about it. It just tugs at the heart as it all just slowly progresses, of course. And of course, it builds and builds into this louder chorus section, which pushes that emotion to these much further places as John-C just climbs his effortless vocal range to such soaring heights. And I don't know why, but I just love how his voice sounds on this track in particular. It's just so beautiful and pretty. I mean, those who know Sigur Rós' music knows just what a beautiful voice John-C has, and man, especially on this one, it just literally floors me every single time. And so Valtari moves on to its third track, Varu, roughly translating to caution. Or actually it could translate to the word danger, as I found out in Iceland from our very kind taxi driver who took us from the airport to Reykjavik City. And so across this whole beautiful album, Varu is without a doubt one of the highlights of this whole album experience, I feel. It's this beautiful track of these delayed piano chords offset by these droning guitars that are just building up and down, and then you just get these absurdly beautiful vocals again that just glide and float above the whole thing. And this one is such an ambient post-rock drift, of course. Like, it just really captures this beautiful sentiment behind its melancholy presentation. And I'll be honest, it's kind of hard to really describe and interpret music, that transcends the language barrier, but it's probably not even all that necessary, arguably, because yes, I don't understand Icelandic or even the made-up language, but it is what it is. But when it comes to music like this, the emotion that is being expressed in the music just comes across so perfectly without these discernible words, if that makes sense. There's just a sheer melancholic beauty to the whole thing, the music, the vocals, and it's just soaring high above everything in this truly phenomenally beautiful fashion. It blows me away every time, and I truly adore this track because it just tugs at me every single time I hear it. And so we move on. We move on to Rembinuta. I think that's how it's said. I did try to look up pronunciations of the songs just to try get it right, but of course they will get butchered here and there. But this roughly translates to tight knot, which I'll say, remember that for later. I have an interesting story regarding this particular track and our holiday. So to quickly go into it, Really being new to her, opens up with really subtle drones and the presence of such gentle twinkling notes that so calmly just push along everything. And this one has a rather lengthy introduction to it before Johnsy even starts to sing, except for you do get these sort of droning vocalizations in it all, but it mixing perfectly with the instrumentals themselves, sort of sounding like instrumentals as well. But what I love though is just it all just progresses so slowly, so patiently, just takes as much time as it wants. And then about midway through, you just get this really low, rumbling, undulating bass drum that's so satisfying to listen to. It creates this almost ominous worry, I would feel. But it all feeds into this incredibly beautiful melancholy that persists along this album experience. So it's the build-up of this track that amazes me every time I hear it though. It's Johnsy starts singing his vocals as we get this very subtle build-up occurring. But it's when you get to about 3 minutes and 15 seconds, you get a literal explosion of bass and percussion that I literally could not stop hearing when me and my partner visited the geysers on our holiday to Iceland. We stood there and watched as it just exploded constantly, and I remember watching that and I could just hear that particular crescendo from this very song happening every time it just blew up into the sky. And it was just amazing to watch, and hence why I've included footage of it for this song, to be fair. What a sight to behold, and what a thing to have seen. But yeah, remember some of the details though. We'll come back to it. So the next track, Dardalo, I think that's how it's spelled, or Dardalao. Anyway, roughly translates to dead calm. And also remember the name of this one as well. So this is another beautiful droning atmospheric track that rumbles along as it pushes, pushes along as it goes along basically, and you're getting Johnsy's beautiful vocalizations over the top of all of that. And this one has just these beautiful swells and declines as it progresses. It's rising and falling in such a beautifully phenomenal fashion, and it's like you're gazing out across the landscape of Iceland, taking in all that sheer natural beauty. And I adore the ending of this one though. You get some of the most loveliest twinklings of high-pitched notes. They're not, the frequencies as such are not the invasive ones, if that kind of makes sense. They're just perfectly just lovely high little notes, and it just twinkles beautifully like sunlight in the snow basically. And this track just fills me up with this bewildering positive version of melancholy, if that makes sense, like a sort of wistful longing for all that is beautiful in this world. And of course, just to go back to the holiday just briefly, but we'll mention it a bit later as well, this was the song that was playing in my head when we visited the famous waterfalls of Iceland, standing out in the middle of this incredible beautiful landscape, watching and hearing the gentle rumbling of the water pour through those giant cracks. A truly beautiful track that just exudes this phenomenal beauty as it just progresses along that glacial pace. Such amazing levels of patience on this one. And so the album moves directly on to Vardeldu, which roughly translates to campfire. And this one continues that sort of same gentle, wistful melancholy that was established on the previous track, pushed along by those incredibly gentle drones again, only this time it's accompanied by this very sparse but gorgeous piano motif, which is then itself accompanied by these very peculiar little bended notes of what I assume is processed vocals, but I might be wrong on that, so I'm not 100% sure. But there's even the most gentle notes of what I also think is meant to be a glockenspiel, I think it is, And it just helps build up this really beautiful ambience, such pristine melancholy, but the beautiful kind that just leaves you contemplating it all. And this one just proceeds so gently, so calmly. It is a truly beautiful moment on this whole album experience where you've had these incredible build-ups of emotions, and then here, particularly on this moment on the album, it's like the whole thing is just subsiding to this incredibly gentle, relaxing pace, giving us time to feel calm and at peace with everything. And it's a wonderful moment of respite on this album that has been really tugging on our emotions at times, and yet it's still fun. Like, I love that this album does that. It really carries emotion with it and carries you along with that as well, and yet it still finds time to sort of give you moments to collect yourself, and you end up falling into this drift of the second half of the album as it transports you to this really peaceful place. And speaking of, we seamlessly drift into the title track of Valtari, the penultimate track on this album. And this one is a beautiful procession of incredibly gentle drones, accompanied by these really peculiar micro sounds actually that occupy all sides of your headphones, acting as this sort of incredibly gentle mechanical sound that that's pushing and guiding the track along. This one is so incredibly slow and patient again, and I think it's a wonderful way to sort of gently rise up to the end of the album itself. And it comes across as a proper ambient track to me. I would go as far to say this is the kind of thing you might even hear on the likes of the record label 12K. If you know the label and some of the albums on that, maybe that would make sense, but it's just how pretty and gentle and pastoral everything is. You just got these lovely instrumentals that pull themselves along. There's no rushing, no hurrying, just pure patience as we calmly traverse the entire landscape as the snow is glistening amongst the sunlight, twinkling and shining so beautifully. And I find it interesting, the emotional journey this album's taken us on, and arguably, unlike other Sigur Rós albums, the culmination of these tracks, especially in the first half, it doesn't result in music that is huge and grandiose and explosive as the opening, but rather it's all just settling and subsiding into the most gentle, calming experience. And it's one that is so full of this really bittersweet melancholy, and yet it has the most amazing, comforting presence to it all, as though there's a beauty to everything. And I feel as though this is perhaps one of the more underrated tracks on the album, perhaps one of the most subtle compositions the band has come up with. It's a wonderful build-up to this point in the album. And man, when you get there, it's just so beautiful to experience. But of course, there is one more track. So Valtari ends with the final track of Fjögur piano, which roughly translates to 4 pianos, and serves as a kind of epilogue to this whole album experience, And apparently this track is made up of looped parts of old and previously unused material, breathing life into these very bittersweet and somber melodies that Sigur Rós had originally composed. And it just gives this such a melancholy emotion to it all, though. It's just a wonderful 7 minutes of final contemplation as we just hear this piano gently pushing along the composition. No sense of hurrying or rushing again, it's just going along at its own pace. And as it all draws to an end, you're just getting these beautiful drones and twinkling notes that are, they accompany, the most gentle melodies, I feel, but it's all just gently guided us towards the conclusion, a truly beautiful moment on the album, and without a doubt a wonderful way to end this entire experience. And thus we've covered what is, without a doubt, my favourite Sigur Rós album of all time. I don't know why for sure, but I remember when I first heard this album though, it just completely blew me away with its subtleties, its gentle textures, and it all just compresses this concise emotions throughout the music itself. And for me, it just had all the right levels of ambience and drones to make an album that just connects with me on this emotional level. And to this day, it still provides me with this incredibly comforting melancholy experience that always leaves me feeling at peace for some reason. And so I said we'd go back to mentioning the tracks Dardalo and Ribinuter. So on our trip to Iceland, I was saying that when we visited the geyser, I had the track Ribinuter stuck in my head as it was playing it on. And I found it very interesting that this track translates to tight knot, as me and my partner Jen were walking around, taking in all the sights, the beauty of the geysers and stuff. And then I just remember at this one point, there was a massive tight knot appearing in my stomach. I felt a whole presence just come over me suddenly and without warning, as though something was going to happen, and it really twisted my stomach in this weird way, and it was very existential. And I remember being very taken aback by the very experience of it, and I didn't know what was going on. And in the end, it was nothing. Like it subsided, and me and my partner, we went back to the bus. We got back on the bus and headed to the waterfall. And I find it interesting as well that at the waterfall, I was remembering Dardala, which translates to dead calm. And at the waterfall, I was experiencing, calmness, peace, looking out at the waterfall and stuff. And it's interesting because it was at the waterfall that my partner proposed to me, which was a truly breathtaking, beautiful moment, but I wasn't expecting it. And that was why at the geyser there was a knot in my stomach, because she was going to do it then, but wasn't able to get the courage, but was able to do it at the waterfall at the most perfect, beautiful moment. And I just find it so interesting that the songs that were playing in my head at the time, in this very weird way, were relating to the very experience I was having at the time. Very coincidentally and stuff, but I just thought that was so interesting that I kind of had to mention in this very episode. Very unusual. And so yeah, I think with that, we're going to come to the end of our episode of Weird Music today. I just remember, during the whole trip to Iceland, though, when looking out at the wonderful landscapes, I just couldn't get the music of Sigur Rós out of my head. And in a weird way, parts of it felt really oddly intertwined into the actual landscape of it, if that makes sense. I'm not sure it does, to be honest, but that's just how certain things come across to individuals, I guess, right? In any case, though, I thought this would be a lovely way to talk about my favourite Sigur Rós album. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how this video is going to turn out, but I hope it was interesting enough. And so, if you have watched up to this point, then tell me in the comments below, what is your favourite Sigur Rós composition? And if you've ever been to Iceland, what was your favourite part of the country? With that, though, I would like to thank you for watching today's episode of Weird Music. I wish you all the best. Take care, and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.